Cam?
Yes.
I did the final exam. How do we let you know that we've completed everything?
You should get a certificate, and at some point in the near future, we will invite people to upload that to the webpage. But just make sure that you have that, you get that final certificate.
Okay, I'm gonna look for that. Thank you.
They should be sending you an email with that.
Oh, okay.
But if not, go back online and you'll should be able to get that.
Okay.
Cam, while we're waiting, we might need to take this offline, but I was doing the 8.1 today and finished that, and I got logged out and I cannot get back in. I have tried to reset my password and the email password reset thing is not coming. I've tried it at least half a dozen times today.
Have you tried it on a different browser, just on a lark?
No, I've tried it on a different computer, but not a different browser.
Yeah. I don't know offhand. I do believe that they do have tech support, but if not, we could definitely can help you figure that out.
Yeah, I tried the chat and that was not useful.
Okay. Well, we can definitely help you with that. After, just contact me afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, we're at 3 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome back to the last of the scheduled basic CERT training hybrid discussion lists. Same usual suspects. And we're going to focus today on terrorism and hazardous material safety. I should actually note here that I actually find this to be one of the more difficult subjects for me to teach. And I realized that in part that I react to this topic the way that many people react to other topics that I'm very comfortable with. And that being that I don't like the fact that terrorism exists. I don't like that it is an issue at all. And so I find myself wanting to say, I don't want to think about it. And while I know that's not a helpful response, I realize that for many other people, that's how they feel about fire and about medical and about disasters in general. And so I had to really reframe it for myself in thinking instead of, it is true that these are rare but possible events. But by building situational awareness, by building the skills to successfully respond to this unlikely event, that it helps us in a wide range of potential situations. And so I'm not sure if anyone else has the same kind of emotional reaction to it that I do, but I offer to you that recommendation to think of it in terms of these are useful, more generalizable skills. And just as a reminder, this is meant to be a discussion and not so, and I will try to minimize the amount of time that I am talking and give a chance for people to share their perspectives. If anything comes up, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask a question, or to use the chat window and ask a question there. That said, if you're not speaking at the time, go ahead and stay muted so that we don't have crosstalk.
I wanted to say, Cam, that this is a very timely topic with what's been going on in our government, domestic terrorism, and even in state capitals and who knows where. So yeah. I think
I did note that last. Yes, it is unfortunately relevant. So when we think about what exactly is terrorism, and I think that it's nice to have kind of a common definition, and that it's not just the fact that it's an unlawful use of force or violence, but it is used for the intention of intimidation or coercion, and that it is about invoking terror. And so that idea that it is not just about a specific act, but it is about the emotional impact that it has on individuals and on society. And so in terms of what can we do, there are a few things to consider. One of the big ones is being situationally aware. And what I've heard described as listen to the little voice. And this is true both from a potential terrorist environment, but also in terms of personal safety and in terms of societal safety, is that if that little voice is telling you something's not quite right, it is good to listen to that little voice. We are pattern-seeking animals, and a lot of times that we will have a sense that something's not quite right. And there's a lot that we can do as individuals in terms of information awareness and also in terms of mitigating a situation. That said, as CERT members, we are not responders to terrorism. But as individuals, it's potential that we could happen to be in an environment. And so being aware of, is there someone engaging in behavior that doesn't match the situation? Is there surveillance going on? Is there testing going on? Things like that. When we think about terrorism, we tend to think about the big bads. We think about chemical, biological warfare, radiological, nuclear, large explosions. The biggest thing, like so often, is to be safe yourself. So if you see something that suggests, this could be engaging a terrorist incident, don't touch it. Move away and let someone know. That said, a lot of what we have been seeing is, in terms of terrorism, is a different scale. It tends to be more active shooter situations, homemade bombs, smaller scale attacks. Personal safety, family safety is your first priority. We are not equipped, we are not trained to respond to terrorist incidents. Do not move towards the incident, move away from the incident. The other thing to be aware of is that it is a crime scene. And as such, you want to make sure not to disturb evidence. It also goes back to, it is really good to have situational awareness and to make note of things that are good descriptors of what you see. And that's true for crime prevention in general, or a crime response in general. There are some things, practical things that we can do in terms of preparedness. One example that you saw in the class was the idea of having the materials on hand to do shelter in place. This is something that is, especially if there's especially for the communities that live near a potential hazardous site, say up in Richmond, because they've got the refineries there. That is something that everyone should have the ability to do a shelter in place. Unfortunately, I think that one of the situations that has become more common is the potential for an active shooter. And like many hazardous situations, how we behave has a profound impact on how we survive. And the phrase that has been used in training is run, hide, fight. And the single most important thing is, if there's a way to get away, get away. And actually, just as an aside, where it says have an escape route and plan in mind ahead of time, when I hang out with firefighters, if you turn to a firefighter in wherever they are and say, where are the exits? They will know where the exits are. Not because they're anticipating a terror incident, but because from a fire safety perspective. And so that's an example of a good habit to develop that is a broad spectrum safety, is developing that situational awareness of where am I? What are the exit routes? And having just where would I go? Things like that. Not to obsess about, but just to develop a little bit of awareness.
Can I interrupt with a sort of a comment?
Please.
Question, or you can address it later. I was recently staying in a hotel about 6 months ago, and I noticed signs by the elevators that people who are, say, in wheelchairs should stay there. And I thought that's really a problem if there's a fire and you need to evacuate and you're in a wheelchair. But I think it's something that maybe we should, at the end of the class, we ought to think about that.
Okay, my understanding, and if anyone else has further information about this, but my understanding is in a building that has stairwells, and you'll see that it says staging area for people with limited mobility, that those areas are considered hardened against fire, and that it's also where the firefighters know to go first. So there are specific, I believe that that's a part of building code. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do believe that that is a known thing. Does anyone have any further information about that?
Cam, I do believe you're correct. This is Selena.
Yeah.
The only other thing, this is Chris, that I could add would be that I noticed in PAMP in San Carlos, they have a similar thing, and that there is also a way, since you're not going to be able to use elevators, probably they have shuttles for getting people in wheelchairs down the stairs.
Yeah, there's a device called the stair chair.
Yeah.
And which is, in a perfect world, people will have a chance to practice with one of those. I don't know, not with our immediate class, but maybe as a future class, we could actually get some people exposure to practicing with those, because that's exactly what they're there for. They're there as a tool. Now, that said, when we practice carries and when we practice transporting people, that's one of the things that we need to think about, is how do we go up and down stairs? So absolutely. Now, with active shooter situations, one of the other things that you're doing is doing barricading. And that is in terms of the run, hide, fight. One of the options is to hide. If you can't get out, you find a way to be hidden, and you prevent someone from coming into the room. These are all things that, again, it's a good thing to just kind of think through, not to obsess about, but to be aware of as a possibility. And then if you're in an imminent danger, the decision to fight is very powerful. The act of throwing anything at someone, they will flinch. Even if you are not a trained fighter, if you are at that point that you need to fight, be willing and able to fight. This is a short video about active shooter events that I want to share with you. Let me know in the chat if there's any trouble with the video coming through. Or right now with it loading. Please stand by. Nope. Let me try that one more time. Nope. If it doesn't work, I will put the link in the chat, and we'll send it out. It's just about 5 minutes, but oh, it looks like we're not going to be watching it today. So. But what the video shows is that idea that really the number one thing you can do in a situation where there's an active shooter is to get away. And if you can't, is to hide and to barricade. And if you have to, be willing to fight. There is a program called Stop the Bleed. And one of the things that they point out is that if you're in that situation, and that there are really three zones. And if you're in the danger zone, you're not going to stop and be treating people. But there may be somewhere in between that is you do have the time, you have the time, you have the ability, that this stopping bleeding is such a life-saving measure that they really decided to create a focus. And I believe that this came out of the Boston Marathon bombing, and the recognition that the use of tourniquets, the appropriate use of tourniquets, saved many lives. And so part of it is tourniquet training, but it's also knowing the power of well-aimed direct pressure. Stop the Bleed is at www.stopthebleed.org. And you can see that it really is the simple steps of applying pressure with your hands. If you've got gloves, great. If you don't, if you've got anything like a plastic bag that can serve as a barrier, great. Otherwise, supporting someone in applying pressure themselves. Again, you want it to be well-aimed, firm pressure. One of the other aspects of their training that is worth considering is the idea of if it is a wound that's open. So if you have a wound that's open and you're putting pressure straight down, that you're not pushing against perpendicularly to the wound. And so if you have the materials to pack the wound and then apply pressure, that then puts the pressure where it needs to be. My hope is that we actually may be able to arrange a Stop the Bleed training and give people firsthand experience with these. And then the third, of course, is the application of a tourniquet. And there's a lot of research that suggests that the homemade tourniquets, just like the grab a belt and pull, is not nearly as effective as a professional tourniquet. And a lot of that is that it needs to have the twisting action to be able to really apply enough pressure to stop the bleeding. Another kind of different style of attack is cyber attacks. And I highly recommend this book by Ted Koppel called Lights Out, which is about the risk to an infrastructure-wide incident. And in some ways, that's when we talk about our power shutoffs, we have a little bit of a taste of what that might be like. And the good news is a lot of our earthquake preparedness ties into this, but it really lends the support for why you might want to have a longer term plan in terms of sheltering in place. I want to stop for a moment. That's just a really wide range of material, and I want to just open up for discussion, for questions, for thoughts, for experiences.
Cam, I believe I can show the video if you'd like me to share from here.
If you can, that would be great. It's just 5 minutes long, so give it a shot and we'll see if we can get that to work.
Let me do that. Okay.
While he lines that up, if people have questions, go ahead and put it into chat.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning Warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you're out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Thank you, Chip, for sharing that.
Was the audio good?
Yeah, that worked.
Good.
If you could go ahead and release the screen and I'll start sharing again.
Yes. Should be there.
Okay, thank you. This will take me just a second. Stand by.
Kim, while you're doing that, I just have one thing to add about escape routes and planning. What I find fascinating is that you'll notice that you can have multiple lines for something like at a checkout stand, or lines at an amusement park. And you'll notice people will bunch up in one line and not go to all the open lines. And I've noticed the same herd mentality when it comes to things like, leaving large events and things like that. Everybody tends to want to follow everyone else. So I always look around and I'm amazed how often there is another completely open route that you can use. And so just always keep your eyes open. Don't follow groups of people without thinking about if that's really the best option, because there's often options that herd mentality is not paying attention to.
That is also true from a fire safety perspective. There was a classic case of a fire on stage at a nightclub many years ago. And there was a stampede of people leaving through the doors that they entered through. And very few people went out the side doors that were much more available. And that's part of that, get in the habit. You almost make a game of it. When you go into a theater, or when we go to theaters again, when we go to places again, that look for all of those exits. Look for where just because honestly, if we don't look for them, they are invisible to us. And so just that moment of consideration can have a profound effect for a number of situations. I see that there's a question in the chat. Carol asked if there's any situation in when it would be a bad idea to ask a victim to apply self-pressure. And the only thing I can think of is that if they are not conscious enough, coherent enough to do so with firm pressure, and that if they are distracted enough, if they are anxious enough that they are not doing it effectively, that is the only time that I can come up with off the top of my head. Any other questions? Like the other topics that we've covered, there is a fair bit of information about both hazardous materials and about terrorism within the field operation guide. And in terms of just hazardous materials in general, the way that I've been taught is the rule of thumb, which is if you hold your arm out and you hold your thumb up, any hazardous material situation should be smaller than your thumb. That's how far away you should be, or farther. This is not hazmat situations. The way that you'd be aware of it is through the signs, the hazard signs that you've seen. And just in terms of, you can also prevent hazardous situations just in terms of the hazards you have in your home. Now that is all I have in terms of formal presentation, but I really want to open it up to questions, not just about this topic, about the course in general. And really this is your time. We also would be interested in hearing if you would be interested in further kind of casual discussion hours. We don't have any scheduled right now, but we are open to the idea of extending this if there is interest. So I'm just going to open up the floor to questions about this topic or any other topic in the course.
I have a question if nobody else does. Going through this last one on page 640. It's got a list of treating others. And the order it gives you is 1, safe place, 2, stop bleeding, 3, maintain body temperature, 4, open the airway, and 5, provide comfort. I was just kind of wondering why open the airway is number 4.
I don't have a good answer to that.
I mean, I understand seems
as someone medically trained, I would put that first.
Yeah, me too.
So I don't have a good explanation for that.
No? Okay, I thought maybe
Cam,
I'm missing.
this is Vicky. I'm in my car. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can. Tell us.
So the answer to that is that's incorrect. Just flat out. Airway is safe place first, airway second, because if someone doesn't have an airway, they're going to die anyway.
Their
So
body
fixing
temperature
the
doesn't
bleeding
really
is
matter.
not the issue, the first issue you should deal with.
Okay,
Actually, I have to share with you that so I have great fondness for people like Vicky and emergency room docs. And a lot of that has to do with perspective. Because with an ER doc, if there's someone who's screaming, their first thought is, wow, great airway.
Exactly. It's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
It's the quiet ones that scare us. And I mean, like I say that jokingly, but it actually is true. I mean, I had one time someone approach me and say, you know what, I'm really out of breath. I'm having a really hard time breathing. By virtue of the fact that they could say that sentence, I wasn't as worried as I might have been. Complete aside, when I went to just check the course, you'll see on my screen, there's actually here is where it says, once you finish the class, this is where it says print certificate. And so if you go to print certificate, it will then download the certificate and you can save that, and that's what you'll be sending.
So Cam, this is, we're coming into an area where I'm probably going to lose reception again. But
Okay.
Just one comment that is completely unrelated to the course
Yes.
is that anyone 65 and older, regardless of what health plan they belong to, can now sign up to get vaccinated at Stanford. And if anybody wants more information on it and how to work through the horror of their online system, I'm more than happy to help you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Vicky, I'm wondering about that. Do you have to have been previously a patient at Stanford? That is what my friend said when he tried to sign up for My Health.
No, you need to open a new account. And in order to do that, you need a credit card, and in fielding questions from people over the weekend, you need a credit card that isn't frozen so they can use that to verify your identity. There's no charge associated with it.
So you're saying they don't have to be a Stanford patient?
You do not.
I'll mention it again.
Yeah,
Thank
so make
you.
sure they know. And if they have any questions, tell them to be free, feel free to contact me.
Thank you.
That actually, I tried that and it didn't work for me, and my credit card is still good, but they kicked me out. So
yeah,
there's some other step that must not be obvious. I don't know.
Yes.
So the credit card is one issue. Other ones are sometimes people have had treatment at Stanford in the past, but they don't have a My Health account, but they still have some semblance of their identity in the Stanford database. And so they get kicked out for trying to create a new identity, but there are ways around it. Oh my God, look at this accident. Jeez. So anyway, we're getting to where I'm going to lose reception. I just want to make sure everybody who's over 65 knows that a vaccine is in their very near future if they want it.
Vicky, can you put your contact information in the chat, please?
We'll put it in there for you.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'm in my car, so I barely know how to do that from my computer.
We don't want you to be typing.
I'm not driving though. Keep that in mind, but it's Cam, if you can put that in there, that'd be great.
Okay, one of us will definitely do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for a great presentation. I'm gonna sign out.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
So Marty asks the question of what do we think is a potential terrorism target in Woodside or Portola Valley? And I mean, actually, Selena might be in a better position to respond to that than I am. I can tell you that when you think about what you've heard of in the news, a lot of them are unfortunately what are called soft targets. It's where anywhere that there is a large group of people. There also are places that city halls, anywhere that has a government presence. Is there anyone else who has thoughts in terms of what are considered potential targets? Again, this is not my area of expertise, and
well, let me add, this is Dave Ellison. Let me just add a couple of suggestions. Water supply sources have sometimes been targeted by terrorist groups. For instance, the open water supply that serves San Francisco, the lakes up near 92 are frequently thought of as a target. The Hetch Hetchy system itself has been mentioned in some terrorist planning documents that were obtained by intelligence sources. So those kinds of things that are, and also electrical substations where you can hit someone can put explosives in those sorts of things. Also bridges, particularly those that, would sever large segments of populations, such as the bridges across the bay. Those have all been the subject of potential risk and have been the subject of planning by the counties in the Bay Area in their planning and in their disaster training exercises. So those are just a few ideas.
Yeah, Kim, it's Vic Schechter. One additional one that I think we had some experience with here actually in the Mid-Peninsula were obviously pre-pandemic gatherings in large social cultural events, concerts, movie theaters, conferences, and so forth. Those seem to be nationally all too frequent place to really do massive damage. And I know for myself, and I'm sorry to even have to admit this, but when I go into a large place, when it was a movie theater or a concert, I'm looking right away at where I'm sitting relative to exits and anything in my area that looks a little bit strange or suspicious. And of course, ball games and all that stuff would apply to pre-pandemic.
Thank you, Vic. Really appreciate that. Julie, you have your hand raised.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, maybe I lost you.
Hang on. I will let her know that we can hear her.
Hello?
Hello, Judy? Julie?
Hello, this is Julie.
We can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to let you know that I used to work for the Department of Defense Contracting Companies, and a lot of that had to do with our waters.
Mm-hmm.
And CDC's, I was the auditor for them, so it's really important that you guys trust that it's kind of covered. We have a lot of classified information that goes into the water systems, a lot of classified information that goes on the motherboards and things of that nature. But I'm pretty sure that the Department of Security Services and our Department defense contracting companies are on top of it. So I want you to not be too alarmed about any of that kind of stuff. We kind of have that handled.
And that really does reinforce that. I mean, we think about the big bads because they are so, they're so prominent in our minds. But I would encourage this to be an opportunity for everyone to think about just situational awareness in general. And that I think that when we think about what are the risks that we encounter, that the disgruntled partner of somebody that we know is more like is a greater hazard than some this concept of the stranger danger. But being aware is a useful skill, like Vic was talking about, being aware of exits. These are all just good habits to be in just in the back of your mind. In the same way that, like, when I'm driving, I keep a small mental note in the back of my head. If I was to see an accident right now, how would I describe the location? Just keeping a little mental ticker saying, I'm on 280 southbound, I just passed exit such and such. And just having that as just kind of a little habit, that means that if I need to describe where I am, that it's not out of nowhere. And it's, again, it's not to engage in paranoia, but it just makes it easier if you need it.
I've been waiting for a pause just to interject a note about hazardous materials. I once worked in a lab that had a lot of strange things in bottles, and I was taught on day one orientation, if you see something spilled and you don't know what it is, don't touch it. Ask somebody who knows what's in every bottle in the lab. So in general, if you see something spilled on the roadside, wait for an expert, report it. Don't get near it, don't touch it. Could cause you problems. Assume that it's toxic. And if you smell something that is not a common smell, leave the area. It could cause you health problems. There's a reason why you don't smell it every day. It's probably being kept away from people. So just a couple little common sense things. Listen to your gut.
I think one other thing I would like to add is that if your gut says, you know, something's not quite right, that emergency services would really prefer that you call with the possibility and to not. That a lot of us is like, oh, well, I have a real hesitation. Whereas just like when you see the accident and you think, well, someone else has called it in, it's actually better to go ahead and try calling it in just in case they hadn't. And they'll say, oh, no, we've got that reported. Same thing in terms of if there is an unusual smell, if there is smoke, if there is some reason for concern. Because the idea that as people who have developed a slightly greater situational awareness, we can help by being the eyes and ears of professional responders. And it's like one time I asked a firefighter, what's the biggest technological change that has happened in firefighting? And he looked me in the eye and said, smoke detectors. Because the smoke detector means that they get to the fire that much sooner. In terms of hazardous situations, in terms of dangerous individuals, we are the smoke detectors, having that situational awareness. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the question of if we do want to continue to have these kind of casual chats, maybe a topic-oriented discussion as a way of maintaining contact until we have the opportunity to meet in person. I have on the screen some possible topics. And we can actually throw up a poll as well, but I'd be really interested in either what topics you feel you want to go into greater depth that was in the course, or maybe a topic that wasn't covered at all. I should add that we are going, as soon as the state of California does have the triage section available, we will send that out and people will be on there. Frank asked the question, this may be CERT taboo, but how do local emergency agencies perceive personal firearms in regards to protecting ourselves during terrorist events? And you're absolutely right. It is not a CERT question, but it is a good individual question. I don't have any specific knowledge about that myself. Is Selena still on the line? So unfortunately, I don't have, the number one thing that I would caution you about is that in a response environment, that law enforcement is going to be looking for threats. And having a firearm certainly will put you in that potential category. And so there is reason to be hesitant, but this is conjecture on my part. This is not a specific, but it is something that we can do some research on and get back to you. Or
So
if there's
Cam, I'll just add to that per our standard operating procedures, we do not let CERT team members carry firearms or other type of weapons. So don't expect to be carrying your your handgun with you while doing some kind of CERT activity that's against our SOP. All type of security, as you mentioned, is going to be handled by the sheriffs or other professional police response agencies.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good question. It's just very much outside of the scope of CERT as a team. Now, that said, I mean, this last unit is, we are not going to be responding as a CERT team to a terrorist situation. This information is for your own preparedness, your own mental preparedness, if you happen to find yourself in that situation. But we're not going to be moving this. We are not professionals in terms of this kind of situation. So we will not be moving towards this situation. Carol, you've got your hand up.
Hi, I had asked a question in the chat, but maybe you missed it. So I'll read it to you. If I can find it, sorry. I have to find it. What's the best way to deal with someone who either has a mental problem? I'm talking about the active shooter situation. Active shooter. Mental problem or PTSD. What if it's a child? What if they have a mental problem and can't keep quiet? You know, you're trying to hide. That's what I'm getting at.
Right. Well, I mean, first and foremost is that given the opportunity, you are going to be helping them get out. And in terms of how to develop a fast rapport with someone is using what I call the voice of mom. The getting eye contact with someone, it's also known as command authority, that if you look someone in the eye and use their name, it's like, James, I need you to hold still right now. Using clear, concise commands, using their name, that can be one technique. That's a very broad question. And so
yeah, so Cam, let me jump in here because I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. And Carol said a very interesting question because when we had a little incident here last week with some power lines down, I learned a very valuable lesson when it comes to younger children like that. They very quickly read off of their parents. They can tell if their parents are acting a little differently or moving quicker. And so in that case, based on my experience with my little ones, is that the most important thing that you can do is to model the behavior. So instead of raising your voice or walking faster, you need to remain calm and quiet. And you need to kind of distract with the toys and activities that they usually are interested in doing, things like regular role playing, things like that, to kind of change the subject. So the direct model, I think for younger children, certainly for teenagers, things like that would work better. But for the younger kids, you got to kind of get on their level and start to divert their attention.
Great question. Julie, you've got your hand up. Is that left over from before, or do you have another question?
I had a quick question. How do you submit topics for casual chat?
Just post it on the mailing list for WPV-CERT training, and we'll have a discussion there.
Okay.
Or tell us right now.
I put one in the chat. About why the SMC alert numbers are so low for Woodside.
Ah, yeah, I am.
And what is being done about it?
My understanding is that actually that may have been a data collection error.
Yeah, I heard I'm sorry to interrupt, but I heard the county people talking about it, but yeah, we need to check if that's for real, and we should see what is being done about it. They cut me off in that meeting, the county meeting.
Yeah, so Carol, Kevin Bryant, our town manager, has already contacted OES to specifically ask about this. As Cam mentioned, we do think this is a data error, so we're waiting for them to get back to us.
Right. Well, if it's for real, it seems like the county ought to do more outreach. And actually, the other thing they need to do is make it opt out rather than opt in as soon as possible. But that's all I have to say right now.
Sheila Brady has also added that it would be great to have more discussion about how to do fire suppression before the fires in our neighborhood. So I think she's talking about fire mitigation and preparedness. And I agree that that's a great topic. And potentially a project, one thing that we can do as CERT teams is that we can do mitigation projects. Once we can start to meet again in person on a casual basis, the idea of not just doing a response to an event, but we can get together and do a mitigation project. That gives us an opportunity to get to know each other. It also gets us an opportunity to do mitigation, which is something that's real. There is not a single disaster that I have been involved with at any level that I haven't thought to myself that preparedness is so much easier than response. It is well worth the time. And I mean, to be honest, that's, I mean, why I'm engaged in this is that it is just so much more effective. Ooh, great comment. Was another great comment is it'd be great to have a discussion about best methods for general communication. We have lots of different ways. We've got groups.io, we've got tweets, Nextdoor groups. But during the CZU fire, it was really hard to keep up to date. And so there is the question of what are the best methods? And I would advocate for that. There was also a comment that right now, WPV-Ready is not being used as a information right now site, but that's an infrastructure question. And we can definitely benefit from looking at what can we, and maybe that's something we can do, but we also have to think about sustainabilities. But I think that communication is always a good topic. Another great recommendation is vehicular evacuation routes throughout Woodside and Portola Valley. By the way, I highly recommend when you're driving home, when you're driving places, challenge yourself to take different routes. Just map it by driving it. Don't take the same route home every single day. Get to know the other routes and do it ahead of time.
Cam?
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to point out is the whole thing about debris flow, which you know, now there's 500 families who are currently evacuated from the Santa Cruz Mountains for that. And there's I don't think there's any discussion that I've come across so far in the CERT manual about that. And in fact, there was something that a friend of mine said, so my kid is talking about debris flow. What is it? Is it a band or something that I'm supposed to know about? So, I mean, there's very little information about that now. And that would be great to be able to actually talk about it. Why is it so difficult? What kind of situations you can really get in trouble with it?
Because
especially now that we've got so much burned land.
That's a great topic. Absolutely. So I want to thank you guys again. You've put a lot of time into taking the course. If you have not finished it, I encourage you to do so. If any questions come up in terms of the course, remember you've got that mailing list that you can ask questions about, and that you can ask questions to and have the conversation. We really want this to be available to you. We want everyone to finish the class and then to be ready for the hands-on course. We will be doing another round of this, so we will be sending out a survey in terms of what did we do well, what could we do better, and we really welcome that feedback. Out of respect for people's time, we'll go ahead and close it out unless there are any other questions. Oh, there was one question of what is debris flow, and it's basically, it's like a mudslide, but it could be any amount of stuff. It's debris. It's not just mud. It could be parts of houses. It could be stuff. And that has been a real hazard, especially in burn areas, because there isn't the vegetation to hold the soil in. And so when you get a large amount of water all at once, it basically becomes a huge mudslide with debris, therefore debris flow.
Yeah, and it's even, you know, in the early stages of recovery, when you still have roots, there's just tons of ash and charcoal and branches and stuff left over after the fire. So you might not even have any mud in it yet, but just having tons of ash flowing down the creek beds and so forth, and overflowing roads and whatnot, it's just as bad as any landslide.
We'll stay on for a few minutes if any questions pop up. And otherwise, I want to thank you guys, and I look forward to meeting you in person when that comes around.
I'm just wondering, any estimates on when you will be able to do the in-person class, and what are your criteria?
I don't know. The criteria is when we believe that it is, we can do so safely. And so right now there are some changes taking place, but certainly when we had the full shelter in place, there was no chance. So we'll wait a little while, but we don't know.
I suggest as you develop the criteria, you might want to communicate it before, you know, people tend to forget about things. They get busy with other things, and they might just.
That's one of the reasons. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I want to open it up to the possibility of having ongoing conversations and or using the mailing list. We're not going to shut down the mailing list until after we've done the in-person training.